Press and Novak talk about the new administration on Crossfire tomorrow.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, coverage of Election 2000 continues. Here again, Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
Stomachs are tight, palms are moist, and people are walking the floor across the United States of America still in search for a winner of the White House. Right now, Texas Governor George Bush has a 4 electoral vote lead. He has 246 to Vice President Gore's 242. 4 states undecided. Outstanding. Here they are. Well, first, here they are. Florida, Iowa, Oregon, Wisconsin, with the electoral votes you see. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, Governor Bush has 246, as we say. His key to the White House, only 24 more electoral votes. On the left side at the top, Vice President Gore with 242 electoral votes. His key to the White House, just 28 more electoral votes.
And here's the reasons we're all biting our fingernails down to the nubs. Here are the numbers. This is the raw vote with 77% of the precincts reporting across the United States. George W. Bush has 49% of the vote, 39.7 million votes to Al Gore's 48%, 39 million votes plus some. Now let's look at the raw votes in those 4 states that Bernie mentioned. In the state of Florida, with 91% of the precincts reporting George W. Bush at 50%, Al Gore 48%.
To 65,000
65,000 separation. Ralph Nader, 2%, 84,000 votes, and you can see a few votes there for Pat Buchanan and John Hagelin with the Natural Law Party.
That means Nader's vote is bigger than the margin by which Bush is leading Gore. If you assign most of Nader's votes to Gore, you probably get an absolute dead heat in Florida.
Right.
Moving on to the state of Wisconsin, with 76% of the precincts reporting. You don't get a whole lot closer than this. Al Gore, 48%, a little over 1 million votes. George W. Bush, 48%, a little under 1 million votes.
5,000 vote margin. Look at Nader's vote.
And there, Ralph Nader is clearly a factor, I think you have to say. 4% of the vote, 77,000 to a few thousand, give or take, for Pat Buchanan, and 630 for John Hagelin. In the state of Iowa, 93% of the precincts reporting Al Gore ahead, with 49% to George W. Bush's 48%. Look how close. What is it? 8,500 votes approximately.
And look at Nader's vote.
Nader's got 5 times that many.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 3 times that many.
25,000 votes, 2%.
Point is, you talk about the Nader factor. When we come down to these states,
that's right.
What you can see is that in these states, without Nader, it's highly likely Gore gets them all.
And in the state of Oregon, the last one we're going to look at here, 54% of the precincts reporting. This is the state where you could only vote by mail. You could not go to a polling place today. You had to vote by mail or deliver your ballot today. George W. Bush, 49% with 411,000 to Al Gore's 46%, 388,000. What is that? A separation of
22,000 votes.
And Ralph Nader has more than the spread there, 4%, 34. Almost 35,000 votes.
And these are mailed-in ballots that had to be in before Election Day.
Yeah. One point. Very rarely does a third-party candidate have anything like this impact in a race. The people who talk about Perot in '92 costing Bush the White House, the Perot vote split, as our exit poll showed, almost dead even between Clinton and Bush. In this case, with Ralph Nader pulling nationally under 5% of the vote, he clearly has the potential to cost Al Gore the White House, which no third-party candidate, as far as I can tell, has ever done.
And it's important that it is not because Ralph Nader is doing spectacularly well. He is not. He probably won't get the 5% nationally he needs to qualify for federal subsidies. He won't even make 5%. He's doing that because the race is so excruciatingly close between Gore and Bush.
But Ralph Nader has said throughout this campaign it doesn't matter to him if he costs Al Gore the election. I mean, his argument is there's not a dime's worth of difference between these two parties. Clearly, Al Gore and a lot of Democrats disagree with that, but that is his contention.
Consider just one other thing. At the start of this race, We all thought Florida was securely in Bush's camp. We all thought the Dukakis states were clearly in Gore's camp. Neither of those things have been true, and that's why we're here at 1 o'clock in the morning wondering who the president's going to be.
Yeah.
All right.
Think about what must be going through the minds of the candidates.
Oh, yeah.
How'd you like to be, George Bush or Al Gore?
Or Al Gore at this hour. And speaking of the candidates, let's go now to our correspondents who know these candidates as well as anybody we know. Candy Crowley is in Austin, Texas. John King in Nashville, Tennessee. Candy, what are they thinking? What are they saying there?
Well, not only is it interesting to think about what the candidates are thinking about, but how would you like to be Jeb Bush, governor of Florida, who is sitting next to his brother as they are waiting for the outcome down there, which obviously can be quite critical. I wanted to put a couple of scheduling words into the mix right now. When you look at 3 of those 4 states that are currently undecided, Florida, George Bush spent 24 of the last 48 campaign hours in Florida. He was there all Sunday. Wisconsin and Iowa. George Bush was in both states yesterday. Certainly the strategist is looking pretty smart right now as this race comes down to 4 states, 3 of which Bush has visited in the last 48 hours. Judy?
John King, when it comes to strategy, are the Gore people feeling they did the right thing?
Well, they certainly feel they did the right thing in the last 48 hours. The vice president, as Governor Bush, visiting those states now down to the wire. They're looking at Florida. If you look at the math, these other states obviously still in play, Wisconsin and the like, but the vice president can only win this election unless some state turns around. The vice president can only win this election if he wins Florida. We're told, he's been told tonight, that the outstanding precincts tend to be Democratic, but he has a lot of ground to be made up. And if you make calls into the Gore campaign, ask them about the Nader factor. The words you get back are words we would not repeat on television. Very upset inside the Gore campaign about Ralph Nader's candidacy. But again, this all comes down to the state of Florida now. They're telling the vice president they believe he can make up the gap. As the tallies come in, he is closing it slightly, but that's it. The vice president, they're watching Florida. That will decide whether he gets to move up from vice president to president.
John, we're hearing a little bit of an echo because they're watching you on the screen right behind you. We're seeing 2 John Kings in the picture here. 2 is better than 1.
Bill Snyder, you said you wanted to emphasize something, and it runs stand into what John was saying about.
That's right.
William Daley, his campaign manager, said you've got to win Florida to win this thing tonight.
Let's get down to where this really stands. Al Gore cannot win with just Florida. He needs Florida and 1 additional state. Any one of those 3 other states, Florida plus. George Bush can just barely win with 271 electoral votes if he carries Florida. If he does not carry Florida, he's got to carry all 3 of the other states in order to win this election.
He can do it without Florida, which is the difference. Al Gore must have Florida.
Al Gore must have Florida, but if Al Gore does carry Florida, then George Bush to win has to carry every one of those other states, Iowa, Oregon, and Wisconsin. That's what it comes down to.
But one piece of good news, there cannot be a tie.
That's right.
I mean, it cannot end now. There's no way to divide the remaining states for 269. There are many ways to divide it so that the winner has 271 and the loser has 267.
What you're saying is there will be an end to this.
Yeah, but you should see the smile on Hal Bruno's face when you just said, Jeff, when you just said there cannot be a tie. Hal Bruno just smiled, and he's smiling again.
I'm wondering, is John King still with us? John and Candy, are they still with us, or have we
No, they're still
said
with
goodbye? John, you said you couldn't repeat what the Gore people.
We remain.
Candy, if I can turn around and come to you on this whole Nader business. To what extent have the Bush people factored that in to their thinking?
Well, look, they're looking at the same polls that we are, and they knew all along that Ralph Nader would be a factor in some of those places. It made Bush competitive. It kept him competitive. I don't think in the long run, if this ends up to be a Bush win, that they're going to argue with what Nader did or didn't do. A win is a win is a win.
And John King, when you said you couldn't repeat what some of the Gore people were saying about Ralph Nader, how hard did they try? Because we know there were some efforts made to persuade Ralph Nader to pull back and you know, drop his challenge.
Well, it was a very late effort, Judy. There was an effort over the internet. There were petitions circulated to major NATO supporters from key Democrats, mostly from the